Can people change? Have you ever wanted to change? Let's talk about it on The Good Life. Hello, friends, and welcome to the pilot episode of The Good Life with Professor G. I'm Professor G, and this is The Good Life, as the sign says. Thank you for spending your time with me today. I know that your time is valuable, and I'm so happy to be a small part of your day. This is a brand new channel that I'm starting, and I've had some folks ask me why it is that I've decided to do this. Now, it's been in my mind for a while, but there's a few key things that have happened in my personal life that recently have led me to the conclusion that this is the right thing to do at this moment in time. Unfortunately, we've had 4 major losses in our family in the past 5 years. In 2019, my sister Pucha passed away. A few months later, my father-in-law Gustavo passed away. Then my mom, 9 months later, and last September, my nephew Aaron passed away. And these 4 people each taught me something very important about life. My sister Pucha taught me that forgiveness is important and that it's healing. My mom taught me that redemption is possible and that just because you make mistakes in life doesn't mean that you're stuck living with that weight being carried forward for the rest of your life. Gustavo taught me that hard work resonates even after you're gone. And my nephew Aaron taught me that life is to be lived in the here and now, and that tomorrow is promised to no one. So, Pucha, Mom, Gustavo, Aaron, this one's for you. Thank you. Another reason that I decided to do this was because one of the most common questions that I get as a therapist and also as a professor at Miami-Dade College is, can people change? And of course, that's an important question to ask, right? Most of the time, I get this question when someone is dealing with a difficult individual in their lives, someone who's, causing problems, someone who they're married to perhaps, or a child. They want to know, can my wife change? Can my husband change? Can my son or daughter change? Can my boyfriend change? Can my boss change? Well, the good news is people can't help but change, right? People can't help but change. Problem is, some of us are moving upwards and others are going down. There's no parallel movement because at the very worst, we're getting older. And these gray hairs are evidence of that. So people cannot help but change. Now, for those people who want to change for the better, there is one key necessity. You must want it. You must want it. Not someone else, not the system, not the government. You must want it. So I'd like to share a story with you guys about a man that I worked with several years ago who wanted that change. We're going to call him Diego. Now, I'll take a brief pause here to share a terrible dad joke with you. What is the most confidential animal in the animal kingdom? The hippopotamus. Now, some of you might know what HIPAA is. This is a law, a federal law, that says that I cannot share, or any therapist or any medical professional can share personal information with anyone about the people that they work with, right? And that's called HIPAA. And because of that, I'm not going to use any personal names, any real names, anything that would identify the people that I worked with. So we're going to call this man Diego, okay? And Diego was a very memorable client. First of all, the first time that I met him, he was a very intimidating character. Now, I've worked with many people throughout the years, and a handful of them have intimidated me a little bit, but this guy was the first. and he was scary. I'd say Diego was about 6'4", 6'5", about 230, all muscle. When he walked into the room that first night, he had to lean down to avoid the door frame, and he had these piercing blue eyes. And he walked towards me. I guess he saw the notepad in my hand and thought, that must be the guy that runs the show. But he walked right towards me, and he looked at me with those piercing blue eyes, and he said, "Are you the group facilitator?" And I said, yeah. And he said, "Where do I sit?" And I said, anywhere you like. Anywhere there was a free seat, go ahead and sit. So he marched over there, stomping his feet, threw himself on the chair, leaned back, the front legs of the chair came up, slammed them down, put his elbows on his knees, and stared at me with those eyes as I started to call the roll. At some point, he got anxious, I guess, and said, "Is my name in there? I'm Diego." And I said, "We'll get to you. I'm sure it's in here." Praying to God that it was in there because I didn't want to let him down. So that first night, just like with everyone's first night, we would do a check-in for all of the group members to share about their week, about their case, anything that they wanted to talk about that was relevant to them. And then at the end, I would have any new person introduce themselves. So I told Diego that he would be getting that opportunity after the check-in. Throughout the whole check-in, while everyone else spoke, he kept staring at me, couldn't take his eyes off of me. And it was, like I said, intimidating. When it was time for him to introduce himself, he leaned forward again and he said, "Is it true that you're going to try to piss me off? That you're going to try to get me in trouble? That you're going to try to make me angry and report me to the court so I can go back inside, back to jail?" And I said, well, no, that's not how this works. Fortunately, I had some other group members who had been with me for a while, and they knew what the program was all about. So they interjected and said, "No, man, you got the wrong idea. That's not what this is for. This is for your self-improvement and for you to learn how to deal with your anger, how to deal with stress, how to deal with domestic situations. That's not what this is about." And then he shares with us, "Someone inside told me that once the judge puts me in one of these programs, the guy running the show is going to try to piss me off, is going to try to get me angry, and is going to try to prove that I have anger problems and put me back in jail." And I said, "I assure you that's not the case." So he showed up with a lot of resistance, which is very common when we have court-ordered people. And I've worked with a lot of court-ordered people over the years. And one thing that we have to deal with is that resistance that they come to us with, right? They think that we're part of the system, part of the court, part of the police, and we're not. We work with them, but our goal is to improve their lives because the better they are, the less chances there are of them committing another crime or going back to jail. So fortunately, he understood this eventually, but not that night. The first night was tough. When group was over, one of the guys that was graduating that evening came to me and said, "You know that new guy, Diego? He had a big argument with some lady in the parking lot over a parking spot." And I said, "Okay, so what happened?" He said, "Well, he got out of the car, started flailing his arms and screaming, and the lady got scared apparently and took off." And I said, "Well, thanks for letting me know." And then he said, "The only reason why I'm telling you this is because it's my last night and I don't want to get in trouble with that guy." And I said, "No worries. Your secret is safe with me. I will not tell him what you said." And he said, "Thank you," and walked out. So the weeks went by. Diego kept attending the group. He kept, staring at me and being intimidating. But about 6 weeks in, we had a topic about our upbringing and our childhood. And one of the guys in the group that was there with Diego that evening, we'll call him John, had shared how when he was a little boy, his father was very, very violent and very aggressive. And one night at the dinner table, John was waiting for his soup to cool off. And his father wanted him to eat and got frustrated with him and said, "John, eat your soup." And he said, "Dad, it's hot." The father didn't like it, got up, walked over to him, put his hand behind his head, and shoved his face into the hot soup, leaving marks on his face. John was shocked. He was scared. Everyone at the dinner table freaked out. And John's dad walked away and left that family scared in that terrible scene. Now, I could tell that that story took John back to that moment in time when that awful thing happened to him as a little boy. Because in his eyes, you could see that he was not there with us at that moment. He was back there with his face full of soup and burned. And there was silence in the room. Now, shortly after that, Diego broke the silence. And he said, "I know what you mean. I come from the same background. My father was very violent. My father was very abusive. If I was out in the streets and some kid bullied me and beat me up, and I went home and I told him what happened, guess what? He would beat my butt and send me back out there to fight the kid again, and said, 'Do not return until you've taken care of business on the street.'" So what I learned was that the world was very aggressive and very violent, right? And so growing up in that environment, I can understand why it is that he thought that I would try to get him in trouble, because that's the environment that he was raised in. That's the type of world that he grew up in. That's the type of mentality that he possessed. Now, he shared why it was that he was in the program. See, one Sunday afternoon, he had been barbecuing with his family, and he needed something from the garage. And he had been drinking, to his own admission, and he was frustrated and went into the garage where they had a big pile of stuff because they were organizing the garage. So a lot of their stuff was just piled up in the middle of the garage, and he couldn't find what he was looking for. So he angrily started throwing things to find what he was looking for. His wife and teenage daughter heard the commotion and came inside to see what was going on and asked him, "Diego, what's happening?" And he grabbed one of the things from the ground and threw it at them and hit his wife with the object. Now, the other teenage daughter who was inside hearing this noise from the garage got scared and called the police. The cops showed up. They inquired on why they had been called. They explained the story to them, and Diego ended up in the back seat of the car. 3 days in jail, spoke to the judge, took a plea, and wound up in our group. So he was very upset at the system, at his wife, at his daughters, and they were upset at him. And a lot of the folks that show up in group have that same situation going on with their families. And it's my job to help them through that process of anger and resentment and ultimately forgiveness. So we had worked a lot on that type of thing. Now, after a few weeks went by, I noticed that Diego started to be more open after he shared where he came from, right? Where he talked about his father, the environment where he grew up, on the streets in South America, being bullied, being beat up on the street and at home. It made sense why Diego was, such an angry guy. Now, he was big and tall and burly and scary when we met him, but he shared that he was a scrawny little kid growing up. And inside that big, burly, hulking man was that scared little boy still in there, afraid that I was going to get him in trouble by saying some things to the court. Over time, he learned to trust the group. He learned to listen. He didn't sit with his elbows on his knees anymore. He sat up straight. He said, "Good afternoon." I don't think he had any more incidents in the parking lot. And he was more open. He shared with us how after several months, because it's a 6-month program, he shared after several months that the restraining order had been lifted. He was able to speak to his daughters. He was able to speak to his wife. And little by little, he started to accept that he came from a very difficult background and was a very angry man. Sharing in group and listening. Over time, his wife and his daughters started to speak to him. There was some healing in the family. There was some forgiveness. But Diego possessed that one thing that I mentioned before that was critical to change, the desire to change. He even shared one night that he had been at the soccer field and some guy had gotten into it with him, and instead of knocking him out, he took a timeout, which is one of the things that we teach in anger management, is the timeout. And he took a timeout, he walked away, and nothing happened. Nothing came of it. And he shared it in group, and he was very proud of that. And I was proud of him. So when week number 26 came by, where it was time for him to graduate, he asked me after group, "Do you think that it's possible for me to continue attending the group on a volunteer basis?" And I said, "Absolutely. If there's a seat available, you're free to have it." And he said, "Thank you." He continued to attend 9 weeks additional to the 26 that he had already done. He is the person who I've had in group who has stayed the longest time after completing their requirements. He stayed for 9 more weeks, and he was encouraging to the new people. He would comment on what he'd learned in the program. He was a very valuable piece of the group, and I couldn't be happier, because after week 4 or 5, I was no longer scared of him, because I knew that inside of him was a person who wanted to change. So when you ask that question, can people change? I have had the distinct privilege of watching a whole lot of people change for the better. And it's been a blessing in my life to have witnessed that, to have a front row seat to that, because when I think about myself changing or my loved ones changing, inside of me is this belief: people cannot help but change. And I want to be a small part of people changing upwards. And these stories that I'm going to share in this channel, and stories from my students and my clients and things of that nature, are evidence that people can change. If I didn't believe that people could change, I would be stealing people's money. I would be a thief, because I'm offering something that I don't believe in, but I do believe in it. And so that's one of the things that I really want to share in this channel, the capacity for people to change. So before I conclude tonight, I'd like to say that there are a lot of people that have been helpful to me in my career: teachers, my clients, friends, my students. I've had a great opportunity to learn from all of these people. And I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone who has deposited something into my life. And 2 very special people concerning this channel: my wife, for being very supportive and for listening to a lot of ideas and kicking things around concerning this channel. She listened very patiently and supported me throughout. And also my good friend, Robert Vienna, who, without him, none of this would have happened. So thank you, guys. I want to finish today's episode by saying a couple of things. Words that you could think of each morning to help you throughout the day. Change is inevitable. Improvement is available. And it is done one day at a time. If today's video brought something good to your life, please like and subscribe, and share it with your family and friends. In addition, if you'd like individual counseling, I'm available in the state of Florida and in the state of Colorado, and my contact information is in the description below. Till next time, go ahead and have yourself a good life.